We are happy to announce that this episode of the SWW show is partially brought to you by Humble Bundle. Well, not really. We are part of the Humble Bundle referral program, and we just wanted to say that if you like really cheap games and maybe helping charity pending the Humble thing going on, all you have to do is go to humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. That's right, humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. And you just do your normal stuff, and it just kind of helps us get a couple bucks here and there. Maybe it helps AJ get his lights. Maybe it's Mike camera. Maybe we actually pay Corey for helping us out. But again, if you're going to go buy games anyway, it might be worth checking out. Hello there, everyone, and welcome. So today we have a special guest from decently around. To get us started, you mind introducing yourself and what we're here to talk about?
Hi, I'm Ruth Vincent. I'm the author of Changeling Charade. It's an interactive fiction game with Heart's Choice. And I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Very well. I'm glad you're here. To get us started, so you said it's an interactive fiction game. What, obviously people kind of have an image in their head immediately what that means. How would you kind of describe kind of what you're doing in this?
Sure. If you remember the Choose Your Own Adventure stories from when we were kids, this is basically like a much more sophisticated adult version of that. So it's an interactive novel. And the premise, it's set in an alternate Victorian London where magic has been outlawed by the Queen, and all of the fairies and werewolves and other supernatural creatures have been exiled to the criminal underworld. And so you get to play a fairy changeling who's masquerading as a human noblewoman. So not only do you get to live her lavish life in the aristocracy, but also her suitors then become your suitors. And the game is very much a love story, but as you pursue these various romantic relationships of your choice, you begin to realize that you're not the only one keeping a secret. Each one of your suitors has a dangerous secret of their own, which they're keeping from you. And so life in the game is this sort of masquerade ball where you're deciding how much you want to reveal and how much you want to conceal and how much you can know about the people that you love and how much you're willing to let yourself be known in return.
I've got to ask immediately, kind of when you were writing this, where did the ideas for this come from? Because obviously when you see this stuff, you're like, it came from somewhere, and I'm like, genuinely reading this, and I'm like, I don't know if I would have come up with any of this. It's a compliment, but it's just, I think, very unique.
Thank you. So actually, I'd originally conceived the idea as a traditional novel, not an interactive novel. My background is in traditional book publishing. I have 2 fantasy novels out with HarperCollins, and so I had originally conceived the idea as a book. The plot at that point was very different. It was actually a murder mystery, but it wasn't working, and I kept revising it, and it still wasn't working. And my literary agent at the time basically encouraged me to just shelve the project. She thought it was just structurally unsound and no amount of revision was going to fix it. And so I did that somewhat reluctantly. And then during the pandemic, when my writers group had gone online, Jason Hill, one of the founders of Choice of Games, which Heart's Choice is an imprint of, spoke to my writers group, and they were actively recruiting writers. As he said, it's a lot easier to teach someone how to code than it is to teach someone how to write. So they were reaching out to people who had a publishing background. And when I started looking into Heart's Choice Games, I realized that this story had never wanted to be a murder mystery. It really wanted to be a romance. And so I restructured it as an interactive fiction game, and I realized that was the form it always wanted to be in. So I was really lucky to find a format that really let the story be, I think, what it always wanted to be.
So in your world, then, kind of, when you think about this, how much does it change the writing and the style of that kind of when you're doing it for interactive versus like a more, I don't want to say non-interactive, I don't know a better term, like the more like stationary traditional reading?
Sure. I mean, I think the key differences are twofold. I mean, one, you're working with an underlying game mechanic, and so it's not just that you're writing prose, and it's not even just that you, the player character, are making choices. Each one of those choices affects your stats, and then the game is going to respond to you differently depending on how each of those stats is increasing and decreasing. And so the game becomes responsive to your choices. But I think, more philosophically, the point of an interactive fiction game is to give the player the experience of being able to make meaningful choices and feeling like you really have agency to make the story what you want and to evolve your character to be the kind of person that you want them to be. And so as I was writing it, I think the real difference between writing a novel and writing a game is I was trying to think with each choice, what would be interesting to a player, trying to imagine what are the choices that someone would care about and feel like I'm giving the player enough agency that the choices that they're making really matter. It's not just a choice to unlock a different chunk of text. It's actually a choice in who the protagonist is as a character and how they behave and how the world around them responds to them.
How that has to... That's such a fundamental shift. I'm kind of curious, kind of in that then, how much kind of, because you've gone through multiple drafts, this thinking about it and talking about it. How much did the early versions you understand that, or is it over time you kind of caught that and had to kind of change how it was being written?
So I had played a fair amount of interactive fiction games as a player, both with other entities, and then also I played a lot of Heart's Choice games and Choice of Games titles before I started writing it, because obviously I wanted to work for a company whose games I enjoyed as a player as well as a writer, and so it gave me ideas of how other people had structured it, and so I outlined really thoroughly before I started. I think when you're writing a novel, people always talk about the distinction between plotters and pantsers. Do you plot everything out, or do you just sort of write by the seat of your pants? I had been more of a pantser in my novel writing life, and I realized you absolutely cannot do that with an interactive fiction game. You have to meticulously plot all of the story threads out in advance. So that was what I did. I wrote a very detailed outline, which I showed to my editor at Heart's Choice. That was actually part of the process that we went through. I would submit the outline first. They would give me feedback on various aspects of the story that they had concerns about working in an interactive game format, and then I would rewrite it in response to those edits until we finally got to an overall outline that we felt like would work really solidly as a game structure. And so then when I was writing, I was able to develop the characters more and give more color to the world, but I felt like we had a multi-branch narrative that was structurally sound. We could decorate it, but the building was not going to collapse. And so I think that really helped to start out on a strong foundation. And then obviously, have people beta test it and make sure that, there weren't any bugs that we weren't seeing. But yeah, I think that thorough outline really helped, and it's just essential when you're doing something like this.
Yeah, that's interesting, because obviously every game, I think, especially the writing of them, kind of talks about outlines, and you need to kind of plan your work, but you really had this thing of it's all writing and outlines and that. I'm curious so I'm assuming kind of from your process, maybe you want to talk to that, kind of when you'd hand off the writing, were you the ones then implementing it, or did you hand it to someone off to kind of implement and kind of make the system kind of work?
Sure. So Heart's Choice and all the Choice of games use a scripting language of their own called Choice Script. So that's what I was writing the game in. And so, most of the game is normal text, for lack of a better word, but you do have this coding language, this scripting language that you're using both to create the choices, to link the choice you made to the text that would follow from that, and also to set various other variables in the game, like everything from you choose your character's name, and then that name is coded so that the other characters respond to you in kind, or you can choose the gender of most of the love interest characters, and so the pronouns and the descriptions of those characters are also coded in choice script. So this was my first experience coding, because again, I didn't come from a coding background. I came just from a writing background. But so it was a bit of a learning curve. But I was fortunate that I was able to look at the code to actually, sort of look under the hood of some of their existing games. My editor had also written several games for them as well, Rebecca Slitt, and so I was able to see examples of how that code had worked in real life through various games that were dealing with similar situations that I was trying to do, and so I was kind of able to learn from example. And I was lucky as well that I think ChoiceScript is a scripting language that's very much designed for creating this type of interactive fiction game. And so as an entry point to coding for someone who doesn't have that background, it made it a lot more accessible.
That's very interesting. That obviously, that's such a change. Kind of, I want to talk through kind of as we said, kind of you got placed in this world. You're kind of hiding, kind of in plain sight. It's kind of the best way I can describe it. Kind of, how kind of were you kind of thinking of ways to both make it so the character is believable, kind of in plain sight, but also kind of planting those seeds where people around them kind of were suspicious, or maybe you had to make sure you're kind of blending in to make sure that it made sense kind of to someone in that experience?
Sure. One of the things that I tried to develop in the game is the culture and lore of the fairies in that society, to sort of give a sense of a world that extended beyond the choices that you were making in the particular story. And then, so some of that was a narrative choice. And then some of it was a coding choice of, as you're developing these various stats, the game is testing you. And so, a character will react different, a secondary character will react differently with you, will believe you or not believe you based on, how much you've been developing your various abilities of persuasion and stealth and cunning and these various skills, and so that was how I tried to balance the player having agency in the story, but also the game being able to be responsive to what you're doing, and to work that into the world building of being a changeling.
That's very interesting. Also, I'm also curious, because changeling's like a term, right? It's not per se you invented for this.
No, it's a term in folklore, in Celtic folklore. Traditionally, changelings were fairies who had switched places with a human being. In some folklore, it was a child. The fairies would swap one of their own children for a human child. But there are certainly changeling stories about adults as well. So in my two novels with Harper Voyager, Elixir and Unveiled, they're both about changelings as well, actually, but in a very different guise. They're set in contemporary times. The changeling there works as a private detective solving missing person cases, which obviously she's uniquely well suited to do. But before writing those books, I had done a lot of research on changeling folklore. I'd read a wonderful 1,000-page kind of behemoth called The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries, which was actually interviews that were conducted around the 1880s to 1900 with people in rural Ireland who still very much believed in changelings. And so this academic went and kind of collected all of their stories when a lot of those folklore tales were very much, in circulation. So I did a lot of reading up on it. I definitely made my own twist on it in the game. But yeah, I was playing with a lot of existing folklore myths and tropes.
So that's interesting. So do you like kind of sitting in that world and sitting kind of in that tropes, or do you kind of think your next writings kind of might kind of change out of this?
So I'm thinking about what my next project might be, and yeah, I mean, since I've written two books and a game that are about changelings, I am actually considering some very different projects. I had another idea for an interactive fiction game that would basically be like the Great British Bake Off, but with magic, where the ability to do magic as a human being is akin to the ability to cook. And so, some people sort of have this knack for it, but the magic only lasts as long as what you eat, stays in your system. So it's not magic that's going to save the world, but it's magic that's a lot of fun. And it's this competition of, baker wizards. So I've had various ideas that I've been playing with, playing with the idea of a novel about female werewolves. So I'm always sort of cooking up different projects. But since the game is so recently out in the world, I sort of took a deep breath, and I'm contemplating what might come next.
No, that's valid. Do you think what's next for you will be kind of working with them or something similar again, or do you kind of see yourself kind of jumping out of this?
I mean, it's up to Heart's choice, obviously, if they want to have me back. This game literally just came out on February 9th, Changeling Charade, so it's very recent, and it's still, sort of out there in the world. People are still playing it. So we'll see. I would definitely be happy to write another interactive fiction game with them. I think, one of the great things about working with a company like Heart's Choice is that you can continue to write traditional novels as well. So I'm planning on continuing to do both, to write books and to write games.
No, that makes a lot of sense, kind of. So as we said, right now it can be found on Steam. Is there any other spots kind of people should be looking for it or your other work?
Yeah, it can also be a mobile app game. So you can get the Heart's Choice app either on Android or Apple, iPhone, whatever kind of phone you have. And when you download the Heart's Choice app, you can buy the game directly through the app and play it on your phone. So that's a great option for people. And I think, that's really one of the pluses of an interactive fiction game like Changeling Charade is, it's literally mobile. So you can, play it when you're in line in the DMV, it goes with you. You don't need any special equipment. You don't need to be home. You don't need a console. It's very accessible that way. So I really appreciated being able to write a game that, could be both mobile app or PC, whatever you wanted to do.
Perfect. Well, I say thank you again for taking time to kind of talk to me today about this. So yeah, as I said, people should go check it out. Go kind of see. I think it's very interesting, especially a lot of times you see these kind of experiences and they're like interactive kind of stories, but like you really took the route of like let's strip it down and make it truly this like interactive narrative, which I think kind of is a unique and different twist on it. And perfect. And thank you again for your time.
In a way that you can be a co-creator of the story and be a co-creator of the character and develop the character. And that's certainly the most fun that I've had as a writer. And so I really enjoy being able to share that with players.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. And then best of luck as you continue kind of your writing and work. And hopefully we see you again kind of in this world, kind of working on the next thing.
Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate that.
The SWW show and all of its affiliate podcasts are podcast by me, Mike Maroney, and AJ Losi, sometimes by our contributors, including Corey King. You can follow the SWW show on social media at the SWW show, or sooner or later you go to patreon.com/SWW to help us out. Thank you. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day.